She almost let him back in. Almost. 3 seconds. That is all it took. 3 seconds where everything Evony had spent 8 years building nearly came apart right there on that bench. Caspian saw it. He saw the shift before she could catch it. Her jaw loosened. The tight line across her mouth softened by half an inch. Her eyes, which had been holding him at a distance since the moment he sat down, went somewhere else. Somewhere old. Somewhere she had locked up a long time ago and swore she would never visit again. It was not dramatic. It was not some movie moment where tears welled up and music played. It was quieter than that. Smaller. The kind of thing you would miss if you blinked. But Caspian did not blink. He watched her face do something it had not done since the last time they stood in the same room all those years ago. She remembered him. Not the man sitting next to her now. Not the version of him with the pressed jacket and the careful words and the rehearsed apology sitting on his tongue. She remembered the version that came before all of that. The one who used to fall asleep on her couch with his shoes still on. The one who burned eggs every single morning and still insisted on cooking. The one she had believed, fully and without reservation, was going to stay. That woman, the one who believed that, she flickered across Evony's face like a light someone turned on by accident. And then, Evony killed it. Her expression reset. Her shoulders pulled back. Her chin lifted just enough to put distance between them without moving an inch. Whatever door had cracked open behind her eyes slammed shut so fast Caspian could practically hear it. Gone. The whole thing lasted 3 seconds, maybe less. But Caspian saw it. And that was the problem. Because now he knew something he could not unknow. Somewhere underneath all that armor, underneath the silence and the sharp edges and the years of nothing, she still carried a version of them that mattered. She would never admit it. She would deny it if he brought it up. She would probably leave this bench and spend the rest of the night angry at herself for letting it slip. But he saw it. And you do not forget something like that. Evony's voice went flat. I need to think. 4 words. No emotion behind them. The kind of sentence you use when you have practiced keeping everything locked down so long it becomes automatic. Not tonight, she continued. Not with you standing there expecting answers I do not have. Caspian opened his mouth to respond, but she was not finished. You do not get to show up after all this time and expect me to just, what, fall back into whatever we were, pretend nothing happened, pretend you did not let me walk away without a single phone call. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly, just enough for Caspian to hear the pain underneath the control. This was the voice of someone who had learned to survive by never letting anyone see her break. Someone who had spent years building walls thick enough to keep out the very thing she once wanted most. She had wanted him, once, before he proved he was not worth wanting. Now she sat on this bench with her spine straight and her eyes hard, and her voice carefully emptied of everything that might give him hope. I need time, she said again. And you need to leave. Caspian leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just unwilling to let her push him away without at least trying. When can we talk? I do not know. Tomorrow? Next week? I said, I do not know. Her voice sharpened. Maybe never. Have you considered that possibility, that maybe I have spent years building a life that does not include you, and I am not interested in tearing it apart because you finally decided to show up? Evony? You disappeared for years, Caspian. Years. You let me walk away pregnant and alone, and you never once tried to find me. And now you want to set the timeline. Now you want to decide when we talk and what we talk about and how fast I should forgive you. She shook her head slowly. That is not how this works. You do not get to set the timeline. That is my right. I earned it. With every sleepless night and every bill I paid alone, and every time Stellan asked about his father, and I had to make up some story that would not break his heart. Caspian had no response to that. What could he say? She was right. Every word of it. When I am ready, she said quietly. If I am ever ready, that is when we talk, not before. She was not finished. Do you even understand what you are asking? Caspian met her eyes. I am asking for a chance to explain. No. She shook her head. You are asking me to trust you again. You are asking me to open a door I sealed shut years ago because keeping it open was killing me. You are asking me to risk everything I have built on the possibility that this time might be different." She paused. Let the words hang between them. "If you really understood what you were asking, you would leave. You would give me space. You would let me come to you when and if I decided you deserved another conversation." Her eyes held his, unflinching. "Instead, you are sitting here looking at me like I owe you something, like my pain is an inconvenience you are waiting for me to get over so we can move on to the part where you feel better about yourself." Caspian felt each word land. She was right. He had been so focused on his own need to make things right that he had not stopped to consider what making things right actually meant from her perspective. It did not mean him showing up with explanations. It meant him stepping back, and he was not sure he could do that. Before he stood to leave, Caspian reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a business card. Simple, expensive paper. His name embossed in dark letters. He set it on the bench between them, careful not to let his fingers touch hers. "My personal number," he said quietly. "Not my office, not my assistant, just me. It rings directly to my phone, day or night." Evony looked at the card, but did not reach for it. "When you are ready," Caspian continued. "If you are ever ready, I will be there. No pressure, no expectations, just the possibility of a conversation." She still did not touch the card, did not acknowledge it, did not give him any indication that she would ever use it. But she also did not throw it away. She did not push it off the bench or let it fall to the ground. She left it sitting there, white against the dark wood, while she stared at him with an expression he could not read. Hold on to that detail. It matters later. The card stayed on the bench when Caspian finally stood. It stayed there when he turned toward the parking lot. It stayed there, and so did Evony, watching him walk away with something complicated moving behind her eyes. She did not pick it up while he could see her, but she did not leave it behind either. Caspian walked toward the parking lot without looking back. Every step felt wrong, heavy, like moving through water that did not want to let him go. His body understood something his mind refused to accept. He was walking away from the only thing that had mattered to him in years. But turning around would have been selfish. It would have been for him, not for her. And if he had learned anything from the conversation on that bench, it was that he had been selfish enough already. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes. The sounds of the community market faded behind him. Laughter from children still playing near the booths. Music from someone's portable speaker. The normal sounds of a normal evening for everyone, except him. He kept his eyes forward. The parking lot was 50 yards away, then his car, then the drive home to an empty house where he would sit alone with everything he had just heard. She was right about all of it. That was the part he could not escape. Every accusation she had made was accurate. He had let her walk away. He had failed to find her. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. And now he wanted her to trust him again. The request seemed absurd when he thought about it clearly. Why would she trust him? What had he done to earn that trust back? Nothing yet. But he intended to change that. Behind him, he heard her footsteps, not following him, moving the opposite direction, back toward Maria's booth with its ceramic bowls and handmade pottery, back towards Stellan, who was probably still playing some carnival game, unaware that his entire world had just shifted, back toward the life she had built without Caspian in it. Her stride was steady, deliberate. The walk of a woman returning to something she had created on purpose, something that worked precisely because he was not part of it. She did not slow down, did not glance over her shoulder, did not give him any indication that their conversation had affected her at all. But Caspian knew better. He had seen those 3 seconds. He had watched her face crack open before she sealed it shut again. She was affected. She was just better at hiding it than he was. The sounds of her footsteps faded as she moved deeper into the market, absorbed by the crowd, swallowed by the distance growing between them. That was the last sound she gave him. Caspian knew he had no right to be here. She had built something real, a life, a home, a community that welcomed her and her son. She had done it alone, Without his money, or his connections, or his name, she had not just survived his absence. She had thrived because of it. That distinction mattered. It meant she did not need him, had never needed him. The life she created was not missing a piece where he used to fit. It was complete, whole, functioning exactly as she designed it. He was the one who was incomplete. He was the one with a Caspian-shaped hole where she used to be. For years he had told himself the story differently. He had imagined her struggling, waiting, hoping he would find her someday. He had cast himself as the hero who would eventually return and make everything right. The bench had destroyed that fantasy. She was not waiting. She had stopped waiting years ago. She had moved on in ways he was only beginning to understand. And Stellan, his son, 7 years old, and already fierce, already protective of his mother, already more of a man than Caspian had been when he let her walk away. She had raised him alone. Every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. She had handled all of it without a single phone call from the man who should have been there. Caspian had no right to disrupt what she had built. He was going to disrupt it anyway. Sit with that for a moment. Caspian knew she wanted space. He had heard her say it clearly. Her boundary was not a suggestion or a negotiating position. It was something she had earned through years of solo parenting and silence and survival. He was already planning how to get past it. Not because he was cruel, not because he did not care about her wishes, but because Caspian had spent his entire life believing that effort solved everything. Show up enough times, say the right words, demonstrate enough persistence, and eventually any door would open. He confused determination with love. He mistook his own need for forgiveness with her willingness to forgive. Those are not the same thing. But he had not figured that out yet. Standing in that parking lot, reaching for his car keys, Caspian was already calculating how to find her address, how to learn more about her life, how to position himself so that when she was ready to talk, he would be impossible to ignore. He was planning a campaign, a strategy, an approach, all built on what he needed, not what she wanted. We are not judging him yet. We are just keeping count, watching a man cross a gravel lot toward his car with a plan already forming behind his eyes. A plan she never asked for. A plan built entirely on his own timeline, not hers. The very thing she had just told him she would not accept. The drive home took 40 minutes. Caspian did not remember a single one of them. His hands turned the steering wheel at the appropriate moments. His foot moved between the brake and the gas pedal at every intersection. His eyes tracked the lane markings and traffic signals with the automatic precision of someone who had driven this route 1,000 times. Everything his body needed to do, it handled. Mechanical, practiced. The routine of a man who no longer needed to think about navigation because the path was burned into his muscle memory. But his mind was not in the car. It had gone somewhere else entirely, somewhere years in the past, to the night when everything between him and Evony quietly fell apart without either of them realizing it was happening. The highway stretched out in front of him. Streetlights passed overhead in regular intervals. Other cars moved around him, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Caspian saw none of it. He was somewhere else, someone else, reliving the moment he had chosen wrong. His mother had invited him for dinner. Just the two of them. His favorite meal on the table, which should have been the first warning sign. Eleanor Aldridge never did generous without an agenda sitting right behind it. She had brought up Evony over dessert. Casual at first. A question here, a concern there. She mentioned that she had been looking into Evony's background. The family, the finances, the lack of connections that carried weight in their circles. She never said Evony was not good enough. Eleanor was far too precise for language that crude. Instead, she said she was concerned. She said that love did not always hold when two people came from very different realities. She said she wanted to protect her son from making a decision he might regret. Caspian sat at that table and listened. He did not argue, did not defend the woman he claimed to love, did not push back against his mother's carefully worded doubts. He let Eleanor's words land and settle like something temporary, something he could clear away later if he chose to. That same night, he went home and suggested to Evony that she stay with her family for a while, just until things settled down, just until his mother calmed down, just until the pressure eased, just for a while. He replayed every word of that conversation while the highway moved beneath his wheels. Every moment where he could have chosen differently, every second where he could have stood up to Eleanor and said, "No, this woman matters, I will not let you push her away." But he did not. He chose his mother's approval over Evony's presence. Every single time. Just for a while became forever. Let that sentence sit where it lands. The worst decisions rarely feel like decisions when you are making them. They feel like small adjustments, temporary measures, reasonable compromises that will sort themselves out in a week or a month. A week becomes a month. A month stretches into a year bleeds into 2, then 5, then the better part of a decade. And the woman you told to leave just for a while stops waiting for you to bring her back. Because you never do. Caspian had told himself so many stories over the years. He had been busy. He had been dealing with family pressure. He had been waiting for the right moment. All of it was true. None of it was an excuse. The right moment never came because he never made it come. He let time pass and distance grow, and eventually the idea of finding her became more comfortable than the reality of actually doing it. Somewhere along the way, the search became theoretical, something he would do someday, something that felt meaningful without requiring action. And while he was waiting for someday, Evony was raising their son alone. When Caspian finally pulled into his driveway, he did not get out of the car. He sat in the darkness while the engine cooled beneath the hood. The house ahead of him was large and silent. 4 bedrooms, none of them occupied except his own. A dining room table that could seat 12, where he ate alone most nights. A home designed for a family he had never built. The night pressed against the windows. Quiet, heavy. Somewhere across the city, in an apartment he had never seen, his son was probably getting ready for bed. A 7-year-old boy with dark hair and fierce eyes, and a birthmark below his left ear that matched Caspian's own. Stellan did not know his father existed, did not know the man sitting alone in this dark car had spent the evening watching him from a distance, did not know that his entire world was about to change because a stranger had finally found the courage to stop hiding. Or maybe not courage, maybe desperation, maybe guilt that had finally grown too heavy to carry. Caspian sat in his car and felt the weight of it. All of it. The years he had wasted, the moments he had missed, the conversations he would never have with a boy who had grown up without him. First words, first steps, first day of school, first time riding a bike, first scraped knee and first bedtime story and first everything that mattered. Gone. All of it. Because Caspian had chosen wrong and then kept choosing wrong until wrong became permanent. His phone buzzed in the darkness. Caspian pulled the phone from his jacket pocket. He expected his mother's name on the screen. Another dinner summons. Another carefully worded interrogation about where he had been this evening. Eleanor had ways of knowing things, and the longer Caspian stayed silent about Evony and Stellan, the more certain he became that his mother would find out through other channels. But the name on the screen was not Eleanor. Dominic Voss. Caspian stared at the notification. The glow of the screen illuminated the interior of his car, casting shadows across his face. 3 years since he had seen that name appear on his phone. 3 years of deliberate silence between them. 3 years since Caspian had discovered what Dominic was really capable of, and decided that distance was the only safe response. His thumb hovered over the notification while something cold settled deep in his chest. Why now? Why tonight of all nights? The timing could not be coincidence. Nothing involving Dominic Voss was ever coincidence. Caspian and Dominic had grown up in the same world. Same prep schools with their ivy-covered buildings and unspoken hierarchies. Same university where the sons of wealthy families learned to become what their fathers expected. Same private clubs where deals were made over whiskey and handshakes that meant more than contracts. They had been close once. Not surface-level close. The real kind. The kind of friends who covered for each other without asking questions. who traded secrets at 2 in the morning and talked about building something together once they stepped out from under their family's long shadows. Dominic knew things about Caspian that no one else did. The pressure, the expectations, the quiet doubts about whether the family name was worth what it cost to carry. Caspian had shared those vulnerabilities because he trusted Dominic completely. That trust had been a mistake. 3 years ago, Caspian discovered what Dominic had been doing behind his back. Information accessed without permission. Deals struck using Caspian's name and reputation as leverage. Relationships exploited in ways that left damage Caspian did not uncover until long after the ink had dried. The break had been quiet. No public confrontation. No dramatic scene for the gossip columns to feast on. Caspian simply stopped answering his phone when Dominic called. Stopped attending. Events where Dominic would be present made it clear through absence and silence that whatever friendship had existed between them was over. Dominic had been quiet since then, building his own operation, staying out of the way, until now. The message was 5 lines, no greeting, no warmth. Exactly Dominic's style. Heard you had an interesting visitor today. We should talk. Tomorrow. The old place. Noon. 20 words, no context. Nothing that would concern a stranger reading over Caspian's shoulder. But Caspian felt each one land like a stone dropped into still water. An interesting visitor. That could only mean one thing. Dominic knew about Stellan, about the boy who had climbed over the garden wall to retrieve a ball, about the encounter that had set everything else in motion. How did he know? The estate was gated. The garden was private. The only people who knew about that visit were household staff and Eleanor. Unless someone was watching. Unless someone had been watching for a long time. The message was not a friendly invitation to reconnect. It was Dominic making sure Caspian understood that he knew things, that he was paying attention, that whatever happened next, Caspian would not be operating in secret. Caspian read the message 3 times. His mind moved through the possibilities. Someone on the estate had talked. The staff were loyal, but loyalty had limits when the right price was offered. Or Eleanor had mentioned something to someone who mentioned it to someone else. Information traveled in their circles like water finding cracks in stone. Or Dominic had his own sources, his own surveillance, his own ways of knowing things he should not know. That last possibility was the most troubling. Caspian typed a response before the rational part of his mind could stop him. Before he could remind himself that engaging with Dominic Voss always carried a cost. How do you know about that? He hit send, regretted it immediately, watched the message mark as delivered and then as read. 3 dots appeared. Dominic was typing. Then the dots vanished. Then they reappeared. He was taking his time, making Caspian wait. Every pause calculated, every delay deliberate. That was Dominic. Even his silences were strategic. The reply came in pieces. I know a lot of things, Caspian. A pause. Another message. About you. Another pause. About the woman who disappeared. Caspian's hands went cold. About that boy. His grip tightened on the phone until the edges dug into his palm. Then the final message landed. Things your mother would pay a fortune to learn. Caspian stared at the glowing screen until his vision blurred. This was not a reconnection, not an old friend reaching out after years of silence because he missed the good times. Dominic was holding something, showing just enough of his hand to make sure Caspian understood the weight of what he carried. The question was never whether Dominic would use what he knew. Of course he would. That was who Dominic was. He collected information the way other people collected art or real estate, not for its beauty, but for its value, for what it could buy him when the time came to spend it. The question was what he wanted in exchange for keeping quiet. Caspian sat in his car in the darkness, staring at the phone, while the implications settled around him like snow. Eleanor finding out about Stellan would be catastrophic. She would move immediately. Lawyers, investigators, whatever it took to bring her grandson into the family fold, whether Evony wanted that or not. And Evony would run, again, the way she had run before, Only this time she would know to hide better. This time, Caspian might never find her. Dominic knew all of this, knew exactly what leverage he held and exactly how much pressure it created. Caspian did not sleep that night. Not a single minute. Caspian did not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Stellan's face. The dark hair falling across his forehead in an unruly wave. The fierce eyes that held no fear when confronting a stranger in his mother's defense. The birthmark just below his left ear, small and faint, positioned in the exact same spot where Caspian had one of his own. 7 years old. His son was 7 years old, and Caspian had never heard his voice until yesterday, had never watched him play or run or laugh, had never been there for any of the moments that made up a childhood. Those images should have been enough to keep him awake on their own. The weight of missed time, the reality of a boy who existed without knowing his father's name. But now those images carried something else, something that made his chest tight and his mind race in circles that led nowhere good. Dominic's messages, about the woman who disappeared, about that boy. Things your mother would pay a fortune to learn. Someone else knew, someone who had already demonstrated a willingness to betray anyone for advantage, someone who had been watching, apparently, for reasons Caspian did not yet understand. The ceiling above his bed offered no answers. The darkness gave him nothing but time to think, and thinking was the last thing he needed. Every thought led back to the same impossible place. His son existed. Dominic knew. And whatever game was about to begin, Caspian was already losing. At 3 in the morning, Caspian gave up, pretending sleep would come. He pushed the covers aside and walked through the dark house to his study. The room was cold. He had not bothered with the heat when he came home, and now the chill had settled into everything. The leather chair, the wooden desk. The air itself felt heavy with temperature and silence. He did not turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp on his desk, the one that cast a yellow circle across the surface and left everything else in shadow. The kind of light meant for working late, for reviewing documents that required attention, for the quiet hours when the rest of the world was asleep. His hands knew where to go without conscious direction. Bottom drawer, left side. Underneath the folders he actually used for business, underneath the quarterly reports and contracts and all the paperwork that filled his professional life. There was a file he had kept hidden there for years. He pulled it out and set it on the desk in front of him. The folder was thick, worn at the edges from handling. The tab at the top carried a single word written in his own handwriting, faded now but still legible. Evony. He had not opened this file in months. Maybe longer, but he had never thrown it away, never moved it to storage or handed it off to someone else, or done any of the practical things a reasonable person would do with information that was years out of date. He kept it, right there in his desk, close enough to reach whenever the weight of what he had done became too heavy to carry alone. Caspian opened the folder and spread its contents across his desk. Papers, photographs, printed reports with dates and addresses and names that meant nothing anymore. Every scrap of information his investigators had gathered in the early days stared back at him, organized and useless. Employment records from jobs Evony had held in the first 2 years after she left, a waitressing position at a diner that had since closed, a temp agency that had no current contact information, addresses, 4 of them, each one crossed out when subsequent investigation revealed she had already moved on. Phone numbers disconnected years ago. Names of co-workers who claimed not to remember her or refused to talk. The trail went cold quickly. Within 18 months of her disappearance, every lead had dried up. She had learned to move without leaving traces, to exist in the spaces between official records, to become invisible to anyone trying to find her. In the beginning, Caspian had access to resources most people could not imagine. Private investigators who charged more per hour than some people earned in a week. Database access that could track a person across state lines, across borders, across the gaps where ordinary searches failed. He had used all of it. Every tool available. Every connection his family's money could buy. Then, Eleanor discovered what he was doing. The confrontation was brief and brutal. She told him the search was over. The investigators had been dismissed. Whatever woman had gotten her claws into him during his charity phase was not worth the resources he was wasting or the attention he was drawing to the family name. She cut off his access that same day, changed passwords, reassigned staff, made it clear that continuing the search would cost him his position at Aldridge Enterprises and possibly his place in the family itself. Caspian had rebuilt his own network of resources since then. Quietly, using personal funds Eleanor could not trace. But by the time he had the capability to search again, years had passed. The trail was not just cold, it was frozen solid. The file stayed in his desk anyway, a reminder of his failure, evidence that he had tried, even if trying had not been enough. There was one item in the file Caspian always returned to, a photograph, not professional, not staged. Just a moment someone had captured with a phone camera at the warming shelter the night they first met. Evony stood near one of the serving tables, a ladle in her hand, her head thrown back in laughter at something another volunteer had said. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun that was already coming loose. She wore a stained apron over clothes that had seen better days. There was nothing polished about her, nothing careful, nothing designed to impress. She was beautiful anyway. The kind of beautiful that had nothing to do with makeup or fashion, and everything to do with the light behind her eyes. Caspian had not taken this photograph. He did not even know it existed until one of his investigators found it months later, pulled from a social media post by someone who had been volunteering that same night. The investigator included it in a report without commentary, just another piece of documentation. But Caspian kept it separate from everything else. He had looked at it so many times over the years that the edges were soft now, worn from handling. This was the woman he remembered. Not the one who sat on the bench at the community market with defenses so high he could barely see over them. This was the version who laughed, without checking first to see who was watching, who gave her time to strangers because it felt right, not because it looked good on a resume. He had loved this woman. He had promised this woman things he failed to deliver. And now she had a son with his face and his birthmark, and absolutely no reason to believe he had changed. Caspian set the photograph down on his desk and stared at it until the image blurred with exhaustion and something that might have been tears. Then he reached for the other file. Beneath the Evony folder, there was another one. Thinner, newer. A file Caspian had tried very hard to forget existed. The tab on this one carried a different name. Dominic. He pulled it out and set it beside the first. 2 folders, 2 pieces of his past he had hoped would stay buried, both surfacing on the same night like wreckage from a ship he thought had sunk for good. This file did not contain photographs of happier times. It contained evidence, emails Caspian had obtained through methods he preferred not to examine too closely, transaction records showing exactly how Dominic had accessed information he should never have possessed. Testimony from a former employee who had been willing to talk, for a price, about what really happened during a business deal that had gone wrong 3 years ago. When Caspian discovered the depth of Dominic's betrayal, he had considered using this file, taking the evidence public, letting everyone in their circles see exactly what kind of man Dominic Voss really was. He decided against it. Not because he was afraid, not because the evidence was insufficient, but because using this file would have meant becoming someone he did not want to be. It would have meant fighting Dominic on Dominic's terms, descending into the kind of warfare where nobody emerged with their hands clean. So Caspian chose distance instead. He cut Dominic out completely, made it clear through silence and exclusion that the friendship was over and would not be revived. He thought that would be enough. The file stayed in his desk anyway. Insurance. A reminder, proof that some people reveal exactly who they are if you pay close enough attention. Now Dominic was back, sending messages in the middle of the night, mentioning Evony and Stellan like cards he was preparing to play. Caspian looked at both files spread across his desk. The woman he had failed, the man who had betrayed him. Both of them connected now in ways he was only beginning to understand. Whatever was coming, these files were not going to protect him. 3 years ago, Dominic Voss stole something from Caspian. Not money, not a contract or a client, or any of the usual things men in their position fought over. What Dominic stole was more fundamental than that. He stole trust. The situation began simply enough. Both of them were pursuing the same acquisition, a shipping route through Southeast Asia that would open new markets and create new opportunities for whoever controlled it, the kind of deal that could reshape a company's trajectory for decades. Caspian had spent months building the relationship with the sellers. A family operation based in Singapore, 3 generations of logistics expertise, finally ready to step back and let someone else take control. He flew out multiple times, sat through long dinners where business was never mentioned directly, learned to listen more than he spoke, to understand what the family actually wanted beyond the money. They wanted legacy. They wanted assurance that their operation would be respected, not dismantled for parts and absorbed into some faceless corporation. Caspian gave them that assurance because he meant it. By the time formal negotiations began, he was confident, not arrogant, just certain that he had done the work, built the trust, earned the right to close this deal. Dominic had been circling the same opportunity. They both knew it. In their world, competition was expected. You did not take offense when someone else wanted what you wanted. You just made sure you wanted it more and worked harder to get it. Caspian thought he had done exactly that. He was wrong. The deal closed in Dominic's favor on a Tuesday afternoon. Caspian learned about it through a phone call from the family's eldest son. The man was apologetic but firm. They had received an offer they could not refuse, terms that addressed concerns they had not even voiced publicly, a timeline that matched their needs with suspicious precision. Caspian congratulated them, kept his voice steady and professional, hung up the phone and sat in his office for a very long time, trying to understand what had happened. Something was wrong. The terms the family described, the specific concerns that had been addressed, those were details Caspian had discussed only internally. Strategy documents shared with his own team, private communications about negotiating positions and acceptable compromises. None of that information should have reached Dominic, unless someone inside Aldridge Enterprises had leaked it. Caspian spent the next 2 weeks investigating, quietly, methodically. He did not want to believe what the evidence was suggesting. The truth was worse than he expected. Dominic had not bribed anyone on Caspian's staff, had not found a disloyal employee willing to sell secrets for cash. He had accessed Caspian's private communications directly. The method took longer to uncover. A security vulnerability in a shared server system both companies had used years earlier during a joint project. A backdoor that should have been closed when the collaboration ended but never was. Dominic had been reading Caspian's emails for months. Internal memos, strategy documents, personal notes about the Singapore negotiations. Every move Caspian made, Dominic knew about in advance. Every concern Caspian identified, Dominic addressed first. The entire competition had been an illusion. Caspian never had a chance because Dominic was playing with a marked deck. He had not just competed, he had spied, invaded, betrayed, and he had won. Caspian confronted him 3 weeks after the deal closed. They met at a restaurant neither of them frequented. Neutral territory. Caspian did not want witnesses from their usual circles, did not want the conversation becoming gossip fodder before he decided how to handle what he had learned. Dominic arrived looking relaxed, confident, the posture of a man who had already calculated every possible outcome of this meeting, and found none of them threatening. Caspian laid out what he knew: the server vulnerability, the accessed communications, the strategic information that could only have come from inside Caspian's own operation. He presented facts, not accusations, kept his voice level and his emotions controlled. Dominic listened without interrupting. When Caspian finished, Dominic smiled. It was not a defensive smile, not the expression of someone caught doing something shameful. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for this moment and was pleased it had finally arrived. "Business is war," Dominic said. "You should know that by now. Your family certainly taught mine." Caspian asked what that was supposed to mean. Dominic leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. He explained that the Aldridge family had been stepping on the Voss family for generations, taking deals, blocking opportunities, using influence to ensure the Voss name never climbed quite as high as it should. Did Caspian really think those things happened by accident? Did he really believe his family's success was built purely on merit? "I learned from the best," Dominic said. "I just learned faster." No remorse, no apology, no acknowledgement that accessing private communications crossed ethical lines. Just absolute certainty that winning justified everything, that the only real mistake was getting caught. Caspian cut him off that same day. No dramatic confrontation beyond the restaurant conversation, no public accusations or legal threats. Caspian considered those options and rejected them. Going public would mean acknowledging the security breach, exposing a vulnerability that other competitors might exploit, dragging the family name into a fight that would generate headlines but resolve nothing. Legal action would take years and cost more than the deal was worth. Courts moved slowly, lawyers charged by the hour, and in the end, accessing a shared server might not constitute the kind of theft that carried meaningful consequences. So Caspian chose a different approach. He stopped answering Dominic's calls, blocked his messages, declined every invitation that might put them in the same room. He made it known through the networks that connected men like them that Dominic Voss was no longer someone the Aldridge family did business with. The social consequences followed naturally. Invitations Dominic expected stopped arriving. Deals he assumed he would be part of moved forward without him. Doors that had always been open suddenly required knocking, and no one answered. Caspian did not orchestrate all of it, but he did not prevent it either. For 3 years, Dominic stayed quiet, built his own operation independently, found opportunities outside the circles Caspian controlled. The silence was not peace or acceptance. It was strategy. Dominic was not the kind of man who absorbed a loss and moved on. He was the kind who waited. And now the waiting was over. A text message in the middle of the night, mentions of Evony and Stellan, the implication that Dominic knew things Eleanor would pay to learn. 3 years of silence, broken at the exact moment when Caspian was most vulnerable. That was not coincidence. That was Dominic, patient, calculating, ready to collect on a debt Caspian did not know he owed. Now, before I tell you what happened when Caspian walked into that restaurant, I want you to think about something. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely show you they were never really on your side? Someone who smiled at you while planning to take everything you had? Drop a comment and tell me what happened, because Caspian is about to sit across from the man who stabbed him in the back, and that man is about to twist the knife deeper than Caspian ever imagined possible. The old place was a restaurant on the waterfront called Mercer's. White tablecloths so crisp they looked like they had never been touched. Dark wood paneling that absorbed sound and created pockets of privacy. Windows overlooking the harbor where boats rocked gently against their moorings, masts swaying in rhythm with the tide. The kind of establishment where the staff memorized your preferences after a single visit, where the prices were absent from the menu because anyone who needed to ask could not afford to eat there, where powerful men conducted business that would never appear in official records. Dominic and Caspian used to meet here regularly when they were younger, back when they believed they were building something together, back when Caspian trusted the man sitting across from him at the corner table near the windows. They had celebrated deals at these tables, planned expansions over glasses of wine that cost more than some people's monthly rent, talked about the future like it was something they would share equally. That was before Caspian understood what Dominic really was, before he recognized that the friendship had been a long game, that every confidence shared was information catalogued, that every vulnerability revealed was a weakness noted for future exploitation. The restaurant had not changed in 3 years. Same tables, same view, same discreet efficiency from staff trained to be present without being noticed. But everything else was different. Caspian had not returned here since the confrontation, had avoided this place deliberately, unwilling to sit where they had once shared meals and feel the weight of what those meals had actually meant. Dominic chose this location on purpose. He wanted Caspian to remember, wanted to sit across from him in the exact spot where they had once been allies and remind him of everything that had been lost. Classic Dominic. Even the venue was a weapon. Caspian arrived 15 minutes early. He told himself it was strategy. Arriving first meant choosing the table, controlling the sightlines, establishing position before the other party could set the terms. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. He also needed time to prepare himself, to settle the anger that had been building since the text messages arrived, to remind himself that whatever Dominic said, whatever leverage he claimed to hold, Caspian could not afford to react emotionally. Dominic fed on reactions, used them, turned them into openings. The calmer Caspian remained, the less ammunition he provided. The hostess recognized him immediately. She always had. She led him to a table in the corner, without asking where he preferred to sit. The same table he and Dominic had always used. Caspian took the seat facing the door, positioned his chair so he could see everyone who entered, everyone who moved through the room. His back was to the wall, windows on his left providing natural light, clear view of all exits. The hostess did not comment on the arrangement. She had seen enough powerful men dine here to recognize the instinct. You did not sit with your back to the entrance when meeting someone you did not trust. Caspian ordered water, nothing else. He would not eat here, would not drink anything Dominic might have opportunity to affect. Paranoid, perhaps. But paranoia had served him well in a world where betrayal was just another business strategy. The water arrived in a crystal glass with a slice of lemon he had not requested. He did not touch it. For 15 minutes, Caspian sat alone. He watched the door. Every time it opened, his eyes tracked the movement before his conscious mind could process the information. Threat assessment had become automatic over the years, a skill learned through necessity rather than training. A couple in their 60s entered, dressed for a celebration, anniversary perhaps, or a birthday. They were seated near the windows where they could watch the harbor. A young man arrived next, wearing a suit that cost more than his experience justified. Trust fund, probably, meeting family, or a family attorney for lunch. A woman dining alone, a book open beside her plate, completely uninterested in anyone else in the room. No Dominic. The wait was intentional. Another move in a game that had started before Caspian even sat down. Dominic would arrive at exactly noon, not a minute early. He wanted Caspian to sit here anticipating his entrance, wanted the tension to build with each passing minute. It was working. Caspian ran through every possible reason Dominic had reached out. None of them were reassuring. He wanted money. But Dominic had his own resources now, built during 3 years of operating independently. Simple extortion seemed beneath him. He wanted revenge. That was always possible. But revenge for what exactly? Caspian had cut him off, yes, but Dominic was the one who'd betrayed their friendship first. He wanted something else. Something Caspian had not considered yet. Something that made Evony and Stellan valuable enough to mention in a threatening message. The clock on the wall read 11:58, then 11:59. Caspian watched the second hand complete its circuit. Noon. The door opened. Dominic Voss walked into Mercer's at exactly 12 o'clock. He looked the same. That was the first thing Caspian noticed, and the thing that bothered him most. 3 years of exile and Dominic appeared completely unchanged. Dark hair swept back from his face in the style that photographers loved and business magazines featured. Strong bone structure that made people trust him before he opened his mouth. An expensive suit, charcoal grey, cut to emphasize the athletic build he maintained through trainers and discipline. The easy smile was there too, the one that had charmed investors and board members and competitors who should have known better. The smile that communicated friendship, while the mind behind it calculated angles. But there was something different in his eyes. Caspian saw it immediately. The warmth that used to live there, or at least the convincing performance of warmth, had been replaced by something harder, colder, the eyes of a man who had stopped pretending he was anything other than what he truly was. 3 years of operating outside Caspian's influence had changed him, not softened, sharpened. Whatever restraint he once maintained for the sake of their friendship was gone now. Dominic spotted Caspian immediately and crossed the restaurant without hurrying. Confident, unhurried, every step deliberate. The walk of a man who believed he controlled the situation and wanted everyone watching to understand that. A waiter moved to intercept him, probably to offer assistance or take his coat. Dominic waved him off without breaking stride. 20 feet away. 15. 10. Caspian kept his expression neutral, his hands flat on the table, his breathing steady. Dominic reached the table, pulled out the chair across from Caspian without asking permission, and sat down. "Hello, old friend," he said. The smile had not changed. The eyes had. Dominic settled into his chair like a man taking his rightful place. He studied Caspian's face for a long moment, the way you might examine a painting you had not seen in years. Looking for changes, looking for weaknesses, taking inventory. "You look terrible," he said finally. "Not sleeping well?" Caspian kept his expression flat. "What do you want, Dominic?" "Straight to business." Dominic's smile widened slightly. "I always appreciated that about you. No wasted time on pleasantries, no pretending we are here for any reason other than the obvious one." He flagged down a waiter with a casual gesture and ordered coffee. Black, no sugar. The same order he had made dozens of times at this same table, back when they sat here as something other than enemies. The waiter disappeared. Dominic returned his attention to Caspian. "You did not answer my question," Caspian said. "I did not," Dominic agreed. "I was enjoying the moment. It has been 3 years. Surely we can spare a few seconds for nostalgia before we get to the unpleasant parts." "I have nothing to be nostalgic about." "No?" Dominic glanced around the restaurant, taking in the familiar surroundings. "We used to plan empires at this table, the deals we would make, the markets we would dominate. You were going to be the visionary. I was going to be the closer. Together we were going to make our fathers look like amateurs." He paused, let the memory hang between them like smoke. "What happened to that?" "You happened," Caspian said. Dominic nodded slowly, not agreeing exactly, just acknowledging. "I suppose I did." The coffee arrived. Dominic took a sip and set the cup down precisely in the center of its saucer. "I want to help," he said. Caspian stared at him. The word sounded foreign coming from Dominic's mouth. Wrong in a fundamental way. "Help." "Yes, help. With your current situation." "What situation would that be?" Dominic's smile remained fixed, patient, the expression of a teacher waiting for a slow student to reach the obvious conclusion. "The situation involving a certain woman and her son." Caspian's face did not change. Years of boardroom negotiations and hostile takeovers had taught him how to keep his expression still even when his insides were churning. "I do not know what you are talking about." It was a weak deflection. They both knew it. But Caspian needed to understand exactly how much Dominic actually knew before admitting to anything. Dominic set his coffee cup down with a small click against the saucer. Evony Cordova, 31 years old, currently employed at the Westside Community Shelter 4 days per week and a local bakery on weekends, lives in a 2-bedroom apartment approximately 40 minutes from where we are sitting, raises a 7-year-old son named Stellan. He paused. "Should I continue?" Caspian said nothing. "The boy has your eyes," Dominic added. "And your mother's bone structure, actually. Remarkable how genetics work. Even from a distance, the resemblance is obvious to anyone who knows what to look for." Caspian's hands stayed flat on the table. He did not allow them to curl into fists. "Why are you watching her?" "I am not watching her," Dominic said. "I am watching you." The distinction landed like a blade finding its mark. "I have had someone observing your movements for 3 years, Dominic continued. His voice was casual, conversational, as if discussing the weather or a minor business matter. "Ever since you decided I was no longer worthy of your friendship, ever since you cut me out of deals I had earned, ever since you made it clear to everyone who mattered that Dominic Voss was no longer welcome in your precious inner circle." He took another sip of coffee, unhurried, completely at ease. "Did you really think I would accept that? that I would absorb the loss of reputation and opportunity and simply move on with my life. That being dismissed by the great Caspian Aldridge would not require a response. Caspian kept his voice level. 3 years is a long time to hold a grudge. Grudge. Dominic repeated the word like it amused him. This is not a grudge, this is patience. I have been waiting for the right moment, the right leverage, something that would make you understand that you cannot simply erase people when they become inconvenient. He smiled. Cold now. No pretense of warmth remaining. Then 2 days ago, a 7-year-old boy climbed over your garden wall to retrieve a ball, and everything changed. Caspian's stomach dropped. Dominic had known about Stellan from the very first moment. Before Caspian himself understood who the boy was, Dominic was already watching, already calculating how to use this information. What do you want? The question came out harder than Caspian intended. Dominic's smile widened. Now we are getting somewhere. Dominic set his coffee cup aside and folded his hands on the table, the posture of a man about to make his position clear. I want back in. Caspian waited for elaboration. Back into the deals you have excluded me from for 3 years. Back into the social circles you have closed against me. Back into the opportunities I would have had if you had not decided to punish me for doing exactly what men in our position have always done to each other. You stole from me, Caspian said flatly. Dominic shrugged. A small motion, almost dismissive. I competed. There is a difference. But we should not relitigate the past. What happened, happened. I am not here to apologize, and you are not here to forgive. We are here because the present has changed and we need to change with it. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. Dominic leaned forward slightly. You have a son your mother does not know about. A son living 40 minutes away with a woman Eleanor Aldridge would destroy if she knew where to find her. He paused. Let the words settle. I am offering you an opportunity to keep that information private, to handle this situation on your own terms, without Eleanor's interference, without lawyers and custody battles, and whatever scorched earth campaign your mother would wage if she learned she had a grandson. Caspian's jaw tightened. And in exchange? In exchange, you restore what you took from me. The access, the invitations, the deals, everything goes back to the way it was before you decided I was not worth knowing. You betrayed me, and you punished me for it. 3 years of punishment. I would say we are even. Dominic's eyes held Caspian's without wavering. The question is whether you want to keep fighting a war that benefits neither of us, or whether you want to focus on what actually matters, your son, his mother, the life you apparently want to build with them. Caspian shook his head slowly. This has nothing to do with you, my son, his mother, our history. None of it involves you or requires your permission or your cooperation. Dominic smiled. Patient. Predatory. That is where you are wrong. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Tapped the screen several times. Set the device on the table between them, screen facing up. I have been doing research, he said. Digging into the past, your past, her past, the timeline of how things fell apart between you. He tapped the screen again. And I found something very interesting. Caspian looked at the phone but did not pick it up. Whatever Dominic was about to show him, giving him the satisfaction of reaching for it felt like a concession. Something about Evony, Dominic continued. Something about who she really is. Something that will make you question everything you think you know about the woman you claim to love. You are lying. I never lie about things that matter. Dominic pushed the phone closer to Caspian. Look at the photograph. Tell me what you see, and then ask yourself whether Evony Cordova has been honest with you about anything. Caspian looked down at the screen. His heart stopped. The image on the screen made Caspian's chest tighten until breathing became difficult. It was Evony. Younger, maybe 21 or 22 years old. Her hair was longer than he remembered, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. She wore a simple dress, something casual but well-fitted. She stood outside a building Caspian did not recognize, some kind of restaurant or club with decorative lighting glowing behind her. But she was not alone. Standing next to her, his arm wrapped around her waist with the casual possessiveness of someone who had been there many times before, was Dominic Voss. Younger Dominic. leaner in the face. His hair styled differently than he wore it now, but unmistakably him. The same bone structure, the same confident posture, the same smile that was currently watching Caspian from across the table. In the photograph, Dominic's face was turned toward the camera. That familiar expression, satisfied, proud, the look of a man displaying something he considered a prize. Evony was looking at him, not the camera. Her expression was soft, open, relaxed in the way you only relax around someone you trust completely. Caspian knew that expression. He had seen it directed at himself. In the early days of their relationship, in the quiet moments when she let her guard down and showed him who she really was underneath the careful exterior. Now he was seeing it directed at Dominic Voss. Years before she ever met Caspian, years before she appeared at that warming shelter and changed his life, she had known him, been with him, looked at him the way she later looked at Caspian. The room seemed to shift slightly. The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. Everything narrowed to the glowing rectangle on the table and the image it contained. Surprised? Dominic's voice came from somewhere far away. Caspian could not answer, could not form words, could only stare at the photograph and try to make it fit into the story he thought he knew. It did not fit. There was no place for it. This image contradicted everything he believed about how he and Evony had found each other. Dominic retrieved his phone and leaned back in his chair, satisfaction radiating from every line of his posture. "You should be surprised," he said, "because here is something you clearly never considered. You were not the first wealthy man she got close to. You were not even the first one in our particular circle." He tapped the screen, pulling up more information that Caspian could not see from his angle. This photograph was taken approximately 14 years ago. She was around 20. I was 23. We were together for almost a year. "That is impossible." The words came out automatically, a rejection of information that could not be processed. "Why impossible?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Because she never mentioned it. Because she conveniently forgot to tell you about her history with someone from your exact social world." Caspian shook his head. The motion felt mechanical, disconnected from conscious thought. "Think about it," Dominic continued. He leaned forward, pressing the point. "She appeared in your life so conveniently, at a warming shelter you had never visited before, working as a volunteer who just happened to catch your attention, just happened to be beautiful, just happened to have a compelling story that made you want to save her." He paused. "Does that really sound like coincidence to you, or does it sound like strategy?" Caspian's mind went back to that first night. The shelter, the cold evening outside, the woman with dark hair and a warm smile who had looked at him across a crowded room full of people in need. He had thought it was fate, luck, the universe putting two people in the same place at exactly the right moment. Now Dominic was offering a different interpretation. Not fate, calculation, not luck, planning. The beautiful woman who appeared at the perfect moment was not a gift. She was an approach. Caspian heard his own voice as if from a distance. "No, Evony was not like that. She would never—" Dominic cut him off before he could finish the sentence. "She would never what? Use her appeal and her unfortunate circumstances to get close to a wealthy man, use her intelligence to identify targets and her charm to secure their attention." He picked up his phone and swiped to another photograph, held it up for Caspian to see. "She did it to me. She attempted it with at least 2 others that I know of, and then she did it to you." Caspian stared at the new image. Dominic and Evony at what appeared to be a formal event, her hand resting on his chest, his head tilted toward her ear, whispering something. The body language of 2 people who knew each other intimately. "The only difference," Dominic continued, "is that you were the one she got pregnant with, or claimed to get pregnant with. That was her escalation, her biggest move. And when it did not work, when your mother started asking questions she could not answer, she ran, just like she ran from me when things got complicated." Caspian wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in Dominic's reasoning, the obvious lie that would let him dismiss everything and return to the version of events he had believed for years. But the photographs were real. The images on that screen showed Evony's actual face, her actual expressions, her actual body positioned against Dominic's in ways that suggested genuine intimacy. Dominic was not just showing evidence, he was rewriting history. Every memory Caspian had of Evony, every moment he had treasured, every conversation he had replayed during years of separation, Dominic was turning all of it into evidence of manipulation. The first night at the shelter became reconnaissance. The early conversations became research. The relationship became a long con. And Caspian had fallen for it completely. "You are lying." The words came out weak, without conviction. Caspian heard the doubt in his own voice, and knew Dominic heard it too. "I never lie about things that matter." Dominic swiped to another photograph. "This is us at a charity gala my family hosted. She wore green that night. I remember because she said it was her favorite color." Swipe. "This is my family's vacation property. She spent a weekend there, met my parents. They were quite taken with her, actually." Swipe. "This is a restaurant in the city, our 6-month anniversary dinner. She ordered fish. I had the steak. We shared an expensive bottle of wine and talked about our futures like we would be spending them together." Swipe. 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 The photographs kept coming. Dominic and Evony together. At parties. At dinners. On trips. In moments that looked genuine and intimate and real. Or at least they looked real. Caspian watched them scroll past. His mind catalogued details automatically. The dates implied by clothing styles and background details. The locations, some recognizable, others unfamiliar. The body language. The easy comfort of two people who had spent significant time together. Almost a year, Dominic had said. They were together for almost a year. That meant dozens of dinners, hundreds of conversations, countless moments where she had looked at Dominic the same way she later looked at Caspian. She had never mentioned any of this. Not a hint that she had any previous connection to his world before meeting him at the shelter. Why would she hide it? Unless hiding it was part of the plan. One detail haunted Caspian more than all the others. It was not the locations or the timeline or the evidence of a relationship he never knew existed. It was something smaller, something he noticed in photograph after photograph as Dominic scrolled through his collection. The expression on Evony's face. In every image, she wore the same look. Soft eyes, relaxed shoulders. The slight upturn at the corner of her mouth that appeared when she was genuinely content, rather than performing contentment. The way she looked at Dominic in those photographs was familiar. Caspian had seen that exact expression before, directed at himself. The first night at the shelter when something passed between them that neither could explain. The early months of their relationship when everything felt possible. The morning she told him she was pregnant and they held each other and talked about the future they would build together. Every vulnerable moment they shared, she wore that face. The face that said, "I trust you." The face that said, "I am yours." Now he was seeing it directed at Dominic Voss, 14 years before she directed it at him. What did that mean? Was it evidence that she was a professional? Someone who had perfected the art of seeming genuine? Someone who could manufacture that expression on command and deploy it strategically to disarm wealthy targets? Or was it evidence that she had genuinely cared about both of them? That whatever she felt for Dominic had been real, just as whatever she felt for Caspian had been real? That she was not a con artist, but simply a woman with a complicated past she chose not to share? Caspian did not know. That was the poison Dominic had just injected. Not certainty that Evony was guilty. Uncertainty about whether she was innocent. The inability to look at any memory, any moment, any expression on her face and trust what he was seeing. Every interaction they had ever shared was contaminated now. Every word she had spoken carried doubt. Every time she had looked at him with soft eyes, he would wonder whether she had looked at others the same way, whether anything between them had ever been real. Dominic gathered the phone and slipped it back into his jacket pocket. He had made his point. The images would live in Caspian's memory now, replaying whether he wanted them to or not. "Let me explain what I believe she is," Dominic said. His voice carried an almost sympathetic quality, like a doctor delivering difficult news he wished he did not have to share. "A professional, Someone who identifies wealthy men, studies them, gets close enough to establish genuine emotional connection, and then extracts whatever value she can before disappearing. Money, access, security, whatever the target can provide. Caspian remained silent. His hands were still flat on the table, pressing down as if he needed the solid surface to keep himself anchored to reality. The pattern is consistent, Dominic continued. She identifies opportunity. She approaches carefully, making the connection seem accidental or organic. She builds trust over weeks or months. She becomes indispensable. And then, when questions start being asked, when people look too closely at her background, she vanishes, moves on to the next opportunity, starts the cycle again. He paused to let the framework settle. She disappeared from my life when my family began investigating her background, when they wanted documentation she could not provide, when they asked questions about her history that she could not answer. Dominic smiled slightly. Sound familiar? It did. Caspian hated that it did. Eleanor had asked those same questions, demanded documentation, pressed for details about family and history, and verifiable facts. And then Evony was gone. Dominic was not finished building his case. The pregnancy with you was her escalation, her most ambitious approach. Caspian's jaw tightened. Do not consider the logic, Dominic interrupted smoothly. With me, she settled for what she could access in the short term. Dinners, gifts, introductions to my family's social circle. When complications arose, she cut her losses and moved on. He leaned forward slightly. But with you, she went further. The pregnancy claim created permanent connection. It guaranteed ongoing involvement. A child is not a temporary extraction. A child is lifetime leverage. Stellan is my son. Is he? Dominic raised an eyebrow. Have you confirmed that with anything other than her word, a test, documentation, anything at all? Caspian opened his mouth, but found he had no response ready. When the pregnancy did not deliver what she expected, Dominic continued, when your mother saw through her and the pressure became too much, she ran. Again. Same pattern, same exit. The only difference is she took more with her this time. A child. Years of potential leverage. Future opportunities. Consider what Dominic was doing here. He was offering Caspian a version of events where Eleanor was not the villain, where his mother had not driven away the woman Caspian loved through cruelty and control, where Eleanor had actually been protecting her son from a predator who would have destroyed him. It was a convenient narrative, almost too convenient. If Caspian believed it, he could stop blaming his mother, stop blaming himself, transfer all the guilt and anger and confusion onto Evony's shoulders where, according to Dominic, it rightfully belonged. But convenient did not equal true, and Dominic had every reason to construct a story that served his own purposes. Caspian found his voice. Why are you telling me this? Dominic smiled, the patient smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this question. Because I want you to understand who you are dealing with, before she manipulates you again, before you make the same mistake twice and lose even more than you lost the first time. This is not about helping me. No, Dominic admitted without hesitation. It is not entirely about helping you. I want you to remember this conversation when you need information only I possess, when you want documentation and evidence that I have spent years collecting, when you realize that I am the only person who truly understands what that woman is capable of. He stood, adjusted his jacket with precise movements, smoothed the front of his shirt. I have records, he said. Financial documentation, testimony from people she approached before you, evidence that would make you question everything you thought you knew about her. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table beside the untouched water glass. Contact me when you are ready to see more. He turned toward the exit, took 3 steps, then stopped. Dominic looked back over his shoulder. One more thing. Caspian waited. That child. Dominic looked back over his shoulder. One more thing. Caspian waited. That child, Stellan. Dominic let the name hang in the air for a moment. Have you actually confirmed he is yours? A medical test, legal documentation, anything beyond her word? The birthmark. Birthmarks are not paternity tests, Dominic interrupted. Plenty of people have birthmarks. Coincidence is not proof. He smiled again. Colder this time. The warmth fully stripped away. Because here is the reality about Evony. Her word is worthless. She told me she loved me. She told you she loved you. She told both of us whatever we needed to hear to keep us invested. He paused. How do you know that child is actually yours? How do you know the pregnancy was not already in progress when she targeted you? How do you know any of it is real? Then he walked out. The restaurant door closed behind him with a soft sound that felt much louder in the sudden silence. Caspian sat frozen at the table. The coffee cup in front of Dominic's empty seat had gone cold. The water glass continued sweating a ring onto the white tablecloth. The business card lay where Dominic had placed it, crisp white against the fabric. The woman who disappeared. The child he had never met until 2 days ago. The photographs of her with another man. The accusation that she was a professional who targeted them both. The question about paternity that Caspian had never considered until this exact moment. What would you do? Believe the man who betrayed you 3 years ago? Who had every reason to lie, every motivation to manipulate, every advantage to gain from destroying your faith in someone else? Or believe the woman who disappeared? Who had looked at Dominic the same way she looked at you? Who had never mentioned this history, never explained these connections, never offered anything but her word? Caspian did not know what to believe. And that uncertainty was exactly what Dominic wanted. Now, I need to stop here because this is important. Dominic just showed Caspian photographs of himself with Evony from years before Caspian ever met her. He called her a professional, someone who targets wealthy men for profit. Some of you believe him. You think Evony has been playing Caspian from the very beginning. And some of you think Dominic is lying, that he is manipulating Caspian to get what he wants. Tell me which side you are on. Drop it in the comments right now. Team Evony or Team Dominic. Because I promise you, neither answer is completely right. The truth is more complicated than either of them has told. Caspian should have gone home. That was the rational response. Process what Dominic had revealed. Think carefully about the photographs, the accusations, the pattern Dominic had described. Consult with attorneys. Hire investigators. Approach the situation with the same methodical precision he applied to business decisions worth millions. Instead, he drove to the West Side Community Market. 45 minutes of highway and surface streets, while his mind cycled through the same images repeatedly. Evony and Dominic at a formal event. Evony and Dominic at a vacation property. Evony looking at Dominic with the same soft expression she had once directed at Caspian. He needed to see her face. That was the only thought that made sense. Everything Dominic had said might be true or might be fabrication, but Evony's face would tell him something. Her expression when he mentioned Dominic. Her reaction when he described the photographs. The way her eyes moved when she tried to explain. He would know. After years apart, after everything that had happened, he would still be able to read her. He had to believe that. Because if he could not read her, if he had never been able to read her, then every moment they had shared was built on nothing. The market was 40 minutes from the restaurant. Caspian made the drive in 35. This was not rational behavior. He understood that even as he pressed harder on the accelerator, this was a man grasping for something solid in a world that had shifted beneath his feet. He needed answers. He needed to see her. He needed to know if any of it had been real. The West Side Community Market was alive with activity when Caspian arrived. Vendors setting up displays for another day of commerce. Trucks unloading fresh produce near the back entrance. The smell of baked bread drifting from a stall near the front. Coffee brewing somewhere, strong enough to cut through the morning air. Caspian walked through the rows without truly seeing any of it. His eyes scanned booth numbers as he passed. 14 with its handmade jewelry. 15 with organic vegetables. 16 with scented candles arranged in careful rows. 17 empty. No folding tables covered with rose petal artwork. No pressed flower frames catching the morning light. No small woman with dark hair arranging her displays with the careful attention of someone who took pride in her craft. The booth was bare. The space where Evony should have been standing held nothing but concrete floor and the faint outline where her tables normally sat. Caspian stood there, staring at the emptiness. The market moved around him. Vendors called greetings to each other across the aisles. Customers wandered past with reusable bags and paper cups of coffee. She was not here. He had driven 45 minutes to find an empty space where she used to stand. The woman at the booth next door noticed him before he noticed her. Maria. The same woman who had been watching when Caspian sat with Evony on the bench 2 nights ago. She sold ceramic bowls and handmade pottery in earth tones that caught the light. She looked up from arranging her display, and her hands went still. Recognition crossed her face immediately. And something else. "You are him," she said. Not a question. A statement delivered with the weight of judgment behind it. The man from the other night. The one who made her cry. Caspian stopped a few feet from her booth. "I need to speak with Evony." "She is not here." "I can see that. Do you know where I can find her?" Maria's expression hardened. Whatever warmth she showed to regular customers and fellow vendors had drained away entirely. "She called this morning, said she would not be coming in today. Family emergency." Family emergency. Caspian filed the phrase away for later examination. Did she say what kind of emergency? No. Maria turned back to her pottery, dismissing him. "And I did not ask. When Evony says she needs space, people who care about her give her space, something you apparently do not understand." Caspian absorbed the rebuke without responding to it. "This is important," he said. "More important than you know. If you have any way to reach her—" "Even if I did," Maria interrupted, "I would not share it with you." She set down a ceramic bowl with more force than necessary. "Strange thing about the family emergency, though." Caspian waited. "Evony does not have family, just Stellan. That boy is her entire world, and when I heard his voice in the background of her call this morning, he sounded perfectly fine. Not sick, not upset. Just a normal boy asking his mother what was for breakfast. No family except Stellan." Caspian's mind snagged on that detail, turned it over. But Maria had just said Evony claimed a family emergency. If she had no family beyond her son, and Stellan was clearly fine, then the emergency was fabricated. An excuse to avoid coming to the market today. An excuse to avoid being found. Another layer of contradiction added to the growing pile. The photographs Dominic had shown him. A relationship she never mentioned. The family emergency that was not real. The woman who appeared at a shelter and changed his life, who might have been running a calculated approach from the very beginning. Or the woman who was hiding from something. Running from something. Using whatever tools she had to stay invisible. Both explanations fit the evidence. Neither could be confirmed without talking to her directly. And she was making herself impossible to reach. Every piece of information Caspian gathered contradicted something else. Every answer led to more questions. Every step forward revealed new ground he had not known existed. Nothing fit together in a coherent picture. Nothing made sense. Unless Dominic was right and she had been lying about everything from the start. Unless she was exactly what he claimed she was. Unless Caspian had been fooled so completely that he could not even recognize the truth when it was laid out in front of him. He turned away from Maria's booth without another word. Caspian turned back before he had taken 3 steps. "Do you know where she lives? An address, a neighborhood, anything at all?" Maria stopped arranging her pottery. She faced him fully now, arms crossed, expression closed. The look of someone who had seen too many men come asking questions about women who did not want to be found. "Even if I knew," she said slowly, enunciating each word, "I would not tell you. I am not trying to hurt her." "That is what they always say." Maria's voice carried the weight of experience. Every man who shows up looking for a woman who does not want to be looked for says exactly those words. "I am not trying to hurt her. I just want to talk. I need to explain." She shook her head. "Evony has been running from something for years, working herself to exhaustion, raising that boy alone without complaining, without asking for help, without letting anyone see how hard it really was." Caspian absorbed this without interrupting. 3 jobs at one point, Maria continued. "Did you know that? 3 different jobs while Stellan was in school, just to keep them housed and fed. She never talked about why, never explained what she was running from, but it was obvious to anyone paying attention. Her eyes narrowed. And now you appear out of nowhere. Upset her so badly she cannot work. Want to know where she lives so you can do it again. Caspian met her gaze. I am his father. The words came out before he could consider whether sharing them was wise. Maria went very still. Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track. Surprise, calculation, reassessment. She told you that. She did not have to. The resemblance is obvious. The birthmark confirms it. Maria studied his face for a long moment. Looking for truth, looking for lies, weighing what she knew against what he was claiming. Maria was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Softer, less hostile, though not warm. She showed up in this community 3 years ago. Caspian felt something shift in his understanding. A piece of information he had not possessed until this moment. 3 years? That is right. With nothing except herself and that boy, and a look in her eyes like she had seen too much cruelty to believe kindness still existed. Maria picked up one of her ceramic bowls, turned it over in her hands without really looking at it. A nervous habit, perhaps, or a way to avoid eye contact while sharing information she was not entirely comfortable revealing. I gave her a space at this market because she had genuine talent, and she was clearly desperate. She did not ask for charity, she asked for opportunity. That is different. 3 years. Caspian's mind raced backward through the timeline he thought he understood. Evony had been in Seattle for only 3 years, which meant for the first 5 years after she left him, after she disappeared carrying his child, she had been somewhere else entirely. Somewhere he never thought to search. His investigators had looked in the obvious places, near where she had grown up, near friends she had mentioned, in cities where someone with her skills might find employment. They never found her because she was not in any of those places. For 5 years she had been invisible, a gap in time with no explanation. And then 3 years ago she appeared in Seattle with nothing. What happened during those years? Where was she hiding? What was she running from? The questions multiplied faster than Caspian could process them. Where was she before Seattle? The question came out sharper than Caspian intended. Maria shook her head slowly. I do not know. She has never talked about it. The few times anyone asked about her past, she shut down completely, would not speak to anyone for days afterward. She set the ceramic bowl back in its place on the display. 5 years of her life, and she guards them like they do not exist. Like mentioning them would break something inside her she cannot afford to break. 5 years, completely unaccounted for. A void in the story Evony had told him. When she sat on that bench 2 nights ago, she had talked about struggling, about being alone, about raising Stellan without help. But she had not provided a timeline, had not explained where she had been, had not offered details about the years between leaving him and appearing in Seattle. He had not thought to ask, too overwhelmed by the fact that she was there, that Stellan existed, that everything he thought he had lost was suddenly real and present. Now the absence of that information felt deliberate, a hole in the narrative where something important should have been. What happened during those years? Where was she hiding? What was she running from? And why would she bury it so completely that even people who had known her for 3 years could not extract a single detail? Caspian left the market with more questions than he had arrived with. No address, no phone number, no way to reach Evony except waiting for her to return to her booth whenever she decided the family emergency had passed. He sat in his car in the parking lot for a long time, engine off, windows up, the morning light growing stronger as the city woke around him. The photographs Dominic had shown him, evidence of a relationship she never mentioned. The missing 5 years Maria had just revealed, a void in her history that no one could explain. The family emergency that was clearly fabricated, an excuse to avoid being found. The contradictions kept accumulating. Each new piece of information conflicted with something he thought he already knew. Nothing fit together into a coherent picture. Nothing made sense. Unless Dominic was right. Unless Evony was not who she appeared to be. Unless everything, the shelter, the relationship, the pregnancy, the disappearance, the reappearance, had been calculated from the beginning. Caspian did not want to believe that. Every instinct he possessed said Evony was genuine, that whatever they shared had been real, that the woman who looked at him with soft eyes was not capable of the systematic manipulation Dominic described. But instincts could be wrong. People could be deceived. The most effective operators were the ones you never suspected. He thought about the photographs again. Evony looking at Dominic the same way she had looked at him, the same expression, the same softness, the same apparent trust. What if that expression was a tool, a technique, something she had practiced until it became automatic? Caspian started his car. He needed answers, real ones, not Dominic's version, not Maria's limited perspective, not Evony's silence. He needed the truth, and he was going to find it regardless of what it cost. Caspian spent the rest of that day searching, not for her address. He could have obtained that easily enough with the resources he had rebuilt over the years. A few phone calls to the right people, a private investigator with database access most civilians never knew existed. The tools were available if he chose to use them. But finding her location was not the problem anymore. Understanding her was. He needed information, context, something that would help him make sense of what Dominic had revealed, something that would either confirm the worst or give him a reason to keep believing in the woman he had loved. The photographs were the obvious starting point. Caspian sent copies to a forensic analyst he had used before on business matters, someone with expertise in digital image examination, someone who could detect manipulation, fabrication, the digital artifacts that revealed when photographs had been altered or constructed from nothing. Modern technology made deception sophisticated. Images could be created showing people in places they had never been, doing things they had never done. If Dominic had manufactured evidence, there would be traces. The analyst called back 4 hours later. The photographs were authentic. No manipulation, no layering, no signs of digital construction or alteration. The metadata embedded in the files placed them exactly when Dominic had claimed, approximately 14 years before the present. Years before Caspian met Evony at the warming shelter. She had been with Dominic. She had dated him for almost a year. She had looked at him with that soft expression that Caspian had believed was reserved for him alone. That much was undeniable now. The photographs were real. The relationship had happened. Everything Dominic said about their history together was confirmed by evidence Caspian could not dismiss. But that did not mean everything else Dominic claimed was true. Having a past relationship was not evidence of being a professional who targeted wealthy men. People had histories. People made connections that ended, and started new ones that also ended. The existence of previous relationships proved nothing by itself. Caspian needed more information. The second thing Caspian discovered was more troubling than the photographs. He had his team run a comprehensive background investigation on Evony Cordova, the kind of search that should have returned decades of documentation, birth records, school enrollment, employment history, medical records, tax filings, the trail of paperwork that every person accumulated simply by existing in modern society. The search came back nearly empty. Evony Cordova did not exist before approximately 12 years ago. No birth certificate under that name in any jurisdiction his investigators could access. No school records showing enrollment or graduation. No childhood photographs in any database or archive. No employment history before she appeared as a volunteer at various community organizations around the age of 19 or 20. It was as if she had materialized from nothing, fully formed. No past, no origin, no evidence of the person she had been before she became Evony Cordova. The investigator who delivered the report was clearly unsettled by the findings. He had been conducting background searches for 15 years. People always left trails. Documentation accumulated whether you wanted it to or not. Even those deliberately trying to disappear left something behind. But Evony had managed to erase everything prior to 12 years ago. Or someone had erased it for her. People do not materialize from nothing. They come from somewhere. They have parents who filed paperwork and schools that kept records and employers who reported wages. Unless they are deliberately concealing those origins, unless they change their name, their identity, their entire existence to escape something so dangerous that erasure was the only viable option. Unless they are running from something that would destroy them if it ever found them. 12 years ago, Evony Cordova came into existence, not as an infant, as a fully formed adult with no documented history. The question was why. By evening, Caspian had more questions than when he started his investigation. The photographs were real. Evony and Dominic had been together. That relationship existed years before Caspian entered the picture. Evony's documented identity began only 12 years ago. No records existed before that point. No evidence that the woman he knew had existed before she decided to become someone else. The missing 5 years Maria had mentioned now made more sense within this framework. Evony had not simply been in Seattle for 3 years. She had been Evony Cordova for 12. Before that, she was someone else entirely, someone she had deliberately buried. Every piece of information pointed toward the same disturbing conclusion. Evony had secrets, deep ones, the kind that could change everything. But were those secrets evidence of deception, as Dominic claimed? Was she really a professional who had perfected the art of disappearing? Someone who targeted wealthy men, extracted what she could, then erased her tracks and started fresh with a new identity and new targets? Or were those secrets evidence of something else entirely? Survival, escape. A woman who remade herself not to deceive others but to survive something that would have destroyed her otherwise. Someone who changed her name and erased her past because staying connected to that past meant staying connected to danger. Both explanations fit the available evidence. The identity change could be predatory, a professional covering her tracks between operations. Or the identity change could be protective, a victim erasing herself to stay alive. Dominic wanted Caspian to believe the first explanation. Everything he had said, every photograph he had shown, every accusation he had made pointed toward Evony as manipulator. But Dominic had his own agenda, his own reasons to construct a particular narrative, his own history of betrayal that made everything he claimed suspect. Only one explanation was true, and Caspian had no way to determine which one without talking to Evony directly. Caspian did not know what to believe. The evidence pointed in contradictory directions. Every fact could be interpreted multiple ways. Every conclusion led to more questions rather than answers, and the only person who could provide clarity was refusing to communicate with him. He had tried calling 3 times since leaving the market. Each time, the phone rang once and immediately went to voicemail. Either she had blocked his number or she was deliberately declining his calls. He left messages, asked her to contact him, told her it was important, told her Dominic had reached out, told her he needed to understand what was happening. No response. The silence stretched through the afternoon and into the evening. Caspian sat in his study with the investigator's report open on his computer, and no way to make any of it make sense. She was avoiding him, or she was hiding from something else entirely, or she was deciding whether to trust him with the truth, or she was planning her next move in a long operation he still did not fully understand. Every possibility seemed equally plausible, equally troubling. He had found her after years of searching. He had seen his son for the first time. He had sat with her on a bench and felt the connection that still existed between them despite everything that had happened. Now he sat alone with questions that multiplied every hour. Questions about who she really was. Questions about what she had done. Questions about whether anything between them had ever been genuine. The questions consumed him, and the phone remained silent. The phone rang at 9 in the evening. Unknown number. Local area code. Caspian stared at the screen for 2 rings, his pulse accelerating with each electronic tone. He answered immediately. "Hello?" Evony's voice came through the speaker. Cold, controlled, the careful modulation of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. "I told you I would call when I was ready." Caspian exhaled slowly, tried to match her composure with his own. I know, but something happened, something you need to know about. Silence on her end. He could hear her breathing. Steady, patient, waiting for him to continue while revealing nothing of her own thoughts. Evony, please, this is important. More silence. Then, finally, she spoke. Nothing needs to happen except you respecting what I asked for. I told you I needed time. I meant it. This is not about us. This is about... Everything is about us, she interrupted. That is the problem. You think you can reappear after all these years, and everything should simply resume where we stopped. But it does not work that way. It never worked that way. Her voice had risen slightly, more emotion bleeding through the control than he had heard since the bench. Caspian took a breath. Dominic Voss came to see me. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. On the other end of the phone, Evony went completely silent. Not confused silence. Not the pause of someone trying to place an unfamiliar name from distant memory. This was sharp, sudden silence. The kind that came with immediate recognition. With memory rushing back unwanted. With fear. Caspian heard it clearly even through the phone connection. The shift in her breathing. The way the background sounds on her end seemed to vanish as she focused entirely on what he had just said. She knew the name. She was afraid of it. Evony? Nothing. Are you still there? What did he tell you? Her voice had transformed completely. The coldness was gone. The careful control was gone. Now she sounded fragile, exposed, like someone who had just received news they had been dreading for years. He showed me photographs, Caspian said carefully, measuring each word, of you and him together. Silence again. From before we met, years before. He said you dated him for almost a year. He waited. The seconds stretched into something heavier. Is that true? He asked. Were you with him? Evony's breathing came through the phone connection, unsteady now. She was trying to compose herself, trying to find words that would not detonate everything. It is not what you think. Then explain what it is. It is complicated. Caspian felt frustration building in his chest. Then make it simple. Tell me the truth. For once in our entire history, just tell me what actually happened. She laughed. But there was nothing resembling humor in the sound. Only pain. Old pain that had never properly healed. The truth, she repeated. You want the truth? Yes. Another long pause. He could almost hear her deciding, calculating, weighing options he could not see. The truth is that nothing is what you think, she said finally. Not Dominic, not me, not even... She stopped abruptly. Not even what? I cannot do this over the phone, Caspian. Then meet me. Tell me face to face. It is not that simple. Make it simple. I need to understand what is happening. I need to know who you actually are. The words came out harsher than he intended. He heard her reaction through the connection. A sharp intake of breath. The sound of someone absorbing a blow. Who I am, she repeated quietly. After everything, after all these years, you still do not know. Evony was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped. Softer now, more vulnerable than he had ever heard her. Yes, I was with Dominic, before I met you. Caspian's chest tightened. It was not what you are imagining, she continued quickly. It was not a genuine relationship, not the way you and I were genuine. I thought he was someone he turned out not to be. I thought I could trust him. What does that mean? It means I made a terrible mistake, a mistake I have been paying for ever since. And by the time I understood what he really was, it was almost too late. She paused, drew a shaky breath that transmitted clearly through the phone. I ran from him too, Caspian. The same way I ran from you. The same way I've been running my entire adult life, because every time I think I have found somewhere safe, someone finds me. Someone always finds me. Who? People you do not know. People you cannot protect me from. Try me. Another pause. Longer this time. When I left you all those years ago, I thought I was protecting Stellan, protecting myself. I thought if I just disappeared, if I stayed hidden long enough, eventually the people looking for me would give up. What people? Looking for you, why? Because I know things. Things I was never supposed to know. Things that could destroy people far more powerful than you can imagine. Caspian's mind raced through possibilities. What does any of this have to do with Dominic? Evony's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Dominic found us. After all these years of hiding, of running, of keeping Stellan safe, Dominic found us. Found you? How? I do not know, but if he found us, then she will find us too. She? Who is she? The pause that followed was the longest yet. Your mother, Caspian. The words hit like a physical impact. Dominic works for your mother. He always has. Caspian shook his head, even though she could not see the gesture. That is impossible. Dominic and I grew up together. Our families... Your families have been connected for generations, Evony interrupted. Connected in ways you never understood, ways your mother ensured you would never discover. You are not making sense. Why do you think Dominic approached me first, years before you ever met me? It was not coincidence, it was not random attraction. Her voice cracked slightly. Eleanor was testing approaches, figuring out how to control you, learning what kind of woman you would respond to, understanding your vulnerabilities so she could exploit them when necessary. She paused. I was the test subject, Caspian, the trial approach. Dominic got close to me to study how someone like me thought, what I responded to, how I could be manipulated. Then he provided that information to your mother. So, when the time came to remove me from your life, she already knew exactly how to accomplish it. That is insane. Caspian heard his own voice as if from a distance. Flat, disbelieving. The conflict between Dominic and me, the deal he stole, that was real. I experienced it. I cut him out of my life because of it. And how convenient was that timing? Evony asked quietly. How perfectly arranged. You removed him from your circle right around the time he stopped being useful, right around the time Eleanor needed to redirect your attention somewhere else. You are claiming their entire rivalry was staged. I am telling you that nothing in your life happens by accident, not when your mother is involved. Caspian felt the room become less solid around him. The walls of his study seemed less reliable than they had moments before. Eleanor is controlling. I have always understood that. But what you are describing is exactly what she is capable of, Evony finished. You simply never wanted to see it. You never wanted to believe that the woman who raised you could be that calculating, that strategic, that willing to destroy anything that threatened her control. She paused. I did not want to believe it either. Not until I witnessed the evidence myself. What evidence? Meet me tomorrow. I will show you everything. Documents, records, proof that Eleanor has been manipulating your entire existence, including us, including what happened all those years ago. Caspian's hand trembled where it held the phone. Why should I believe you? After the photographs, after the identity questions, after all the secrets? Because I am terrified, Caspian. Her voice broke on the final word. Not angry, not defensive, terrified. And you can hear it. You have always been able to read me better than anyone else. You know the difference. He did know. He could hear it in every syllable. Tomorrow, he said. Where? A sound came through the phone. Something in the background on Evony's end. A door opening. Small footsteps. Then a voice, groggy with interrupted sleep. Mom, who are you talking to? Stellan. Caspian's chest constricted at the sound. His son, awake in the middle of the night, wondering why his mother was on the phone sounding frightened. Nobody, baby, Evony said, her voice shifting instantly. Warmer now, protective. The voice of a mother soothing a worried child. Go back to bed. I will check on you in a minute. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. Just a work call that went late. I will be right there. Caspian heard shuffling. The sound of a door closing softly. Then Evony's voice returned, lower than before. I have to go. Wait. I cannot explain this to him. Not yet. Not until I understand what we are dealing with. Evony, please, meet me tomorrow. Her voice was rushed now, urgent. The voice of someone running out of time. 6 in the morning. The pedestrian bridge over the river in Fremont, the North Side walkway, come alone. That is less than 9 hours from now. I know, I cannot do this during daylight. Too many people, too many ways to be observed. Caspian should have asked more questions, should have demanded more information, should have pressed for details about the evidence she claimed to possess, about Eleanor, about Dominic, about everything that had led to this moment. But he was too afraid of pushing her away. She was finally talking, finally offering answers. If he pressed too hard, she might disappear again. Change her phone. Move to another city. Take Stellan somewhere Caspian would never find them. He had already lost her once. He could not survive losing her again. I will be there, he said. Alone. Alone, I promise. A pause. Her breathing steadied slightly. Caspian. Yes? Be careful tonight. Do not trust anyone, not your staff, not your associates, not anyone connected to your family in any way. You are frightening me. Good. You should be frightened. I have been frightened for years. One more thing, Evony said. Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. The voice of someone who believed she was being monitored, being observed. Do not trust anything Dominic tells you. Not a single word, not a photograph, not a document, nothing. He showed me evidence. He showed you what he wanted you to see, what Eleanor wanted you to see. They have been constructing this story for years, preparing it, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. Why would they do that? Because you found us, because Stellan exists, because everything they work to destroy is suddenly back in your life, and they need you to believe I am the enemy so you will not examine them. Her voice cracked again. Dominic is not your rival, Caspian. He never was. He is something far worse. What is he? The line went dead. Caspian stood in his study with the phone pressed against his ear, listening to empty static. The silence stretched, heavy, final. He lowered the phone slowly. His world had just inverted. Dominic working for Eleanor. Their conflict staged. Evony used as a test subject for manipulation strategies. A conspiracy extending back years before he ever met the woman he loved. It was impossible. Paranoid reasoning. The kind of thinking that belonged in fever dreams and delusion. But Evony's fear had been genuine. He knew her well enough to recognize that. Whatever she believed completely. This was not performance. This was not manipulation. This was a woman who had spent years hiding from something and had just learned that the hiding was over. One detail haunted him more than anything else she had said. I ran from him too. She had run from Dominic. Before she ever met Caspian, she had been close to him, and then she had fled. What had Dominic done to her? What was he capable of? And what was Eleanor really capable of? I want you to stop and consider what just happened. Evony told Caspian that his closest friend and his mother have been working together his entire life, that their conflict was staged, that she was used as a test subject to figure out how to control him. That sounds impossible, like paranoid conspiracy reasoning. But here is what matters. Evony was terrified, not angry, not defensive, genuinely terrified, and Caspian is about to do something very dangerous. Drop a comment telling me what you think is really happening. Is Evony telling the truth? Is Dominic? Or is everyone lying about everything? Because what happens next changes the entire story. Caspian could not wait until morning. The questions would not allow him to sleep, would not allow him to rest, would not allow him to do anything except seek answers immediately. So he drove to Dominic's building, a glass tower in the financial district. 40 stories of luxury residences where men with excessive wealth lived lives of calculated indulgence. The kind of building with uniformed doormen and security systems and residents who valued privacy above almost everything else. Caspian parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the lobby. Walked toward the front desk with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Someone who had been here many times before. The marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting. The lobby furniture was arranged to suggest exclusivity without appearing ostentatious. everything designed to communicate that the people who lived here had transcended ordinary concerns about money or status. Dominic's building, Dominic's world, a place Caspian had visited dozens of times back when they were still friends. Back before he understood what Dominic really was. The doorman recognized him immediately. Of course he did. Caspian and Dominic had been coming and going from this building together for years before the falling out. Business dinners in the penthouse, strategy sessions that lasted past midnight, the kind of visits that happened frequently enough for the staff to learn faces and preferences and patterns. Mr. Aldridge. The doorman nodded in professional greeting. It has been some time. It has. Is Dominic in? I believe so, sir. He returned approximately 2 hours ago. Has not left since. The doorman did not ask questions, did not call upstairs to confirm authorization, did not run through security protocols that should have governed access to a resident's private floor. He simply smiled and gestured toward the elevator bank. You know the way. Caspian walked past him without hesitation. Years of familiarity had erased the barriers that should have stopped him. The doorman remembered when they were friends, did not know they were enemies now. Assumed whatever visit Caspian was making had been arranged in advance. No security verification, no confirmation calls, just a familiar face and an assumption of legitimacy. Caspian filed this detail away. It would matter later. The elevator was empty when Caspian stepped inside. He pressed the button for the penthouse. Top floor. The only residence on that level. The doors slid closed with a soft electronic hum and the car began its ascent. 40 floors. Approximately 30 seconds of travel time. 30 seconds to consider what he was doing, what he intended to confront, what he might discover. The elevator chimed softly at each floor it passed without stopping. 20. 25. 30. Caspian watched the numbers climb and felt nothing. His emotions had burned down to ash sometime during the drive over. What remained was cold, focused. The mindset he adopted when facing hostile negotiations or corporate adversaries. 35. 38. 40. The doors opened onto a private landing. One door. Dominic's residence. The only unit on this floor. Caspian stepped out and approached the door. He knocked. 3 times. Firm. No answer. He waited. Counted to 10. Knocked again. Still nothing. The building was quiet at this hour. Approaching midnight. Most residents asleep, or at least inside their own spaces. No movement in the corridor. No sound from behind Dominic's door. Caspian was about to leave. To return in the morning. To handle this at the scheduled meeting with Evony instead. Then he noticed. The door was not fully closed. The latch had not engaged. It stood open by perhaps half an inch. Every instinct Caspian possessed told him to walk away. Call building security. Report the anomaly. Let professionals handle whatever was inside. Do anything except enter that residence uninvited. An unlocked door in a building like this was wrong. Dominic was obsessive about security, about privacy, about controlling access to his space. He would never leave his door unsecured. Never. Unless something had happened to him. Unless someone else was inside. Unless this was a trap. Evony's words echoed through his mind. Do not trust anything Dominic tells you. He is something far worse. Caspian should have called security. Should have returned to the doorman and reported what he found. Should have done any of the sensible things a rational person would do in this situation. Instead, he pushed the door open. The penthouse beyond was dark, silent, the kind of silence that felt wrong, heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Dominic? His voice sounded strange in the stillness, absorbed by the darkness, returned to him as nothing. No response. Caspian stepped inside. He let the door swing wide behind him, allowing the hallway light to spill into the entryway. His eyes adjusted slowly to the shadows. The living room was visible from where he stood. Expensive furniture arranged with professional precision. Art on the walls that cost more than most people earned in years. Floor-to-ceiling windows that should have shown city lights but were blocked by drawn curtains. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing appeared wrong. But something was wrong. He could smell it before he could see it. Copper, sharp, metallic, the smell that filled emergency rooms and crime scenes and nightmares, the smell that told you something terrible had happened before your eyes could confirm it. Blood. Fresh blood has a specific quality, a weight in the air that registers in the back of your throat before your conscious mind can identify what it is sensing. It communicates information your brain processes before you even understand what you are perceiving. It tells you to run. Caspian did not run. He moved deeper into the penthouse, toward the living room, toward the windows, toward whatever was waiting for him in the darkness. His eyes adjusted further. Details emerged from the shadows. The back of a leather sofa, a glass coffee table reflecting what little light reached it, a rug that had cost more than most people's annual salary. And on that rug, positioned at an angle that no conscious person would choose, was a shape, a body. Caspian's eyes confirmed what his nose had already communicated. Something terrible had happened here, and he had just walked directly into the middle of it. Caspian found Dominic in the study. The room occupied the back corner of the penthouse, a space designed for work and contemplation. Built-in bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with volumes that looked more decorative than read. A massive desk dominated the center, positioned to face the window that would have offered harbor views if the curtains were not drawn. The only light came from the computer monitor on the desk, blue-white glow casting long shadows across the room. Enough illumination to see what mattered. Dominic was slumped in his desk chair, his head tilted back at an angle no conscious person would maintain. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, seeing nothing, would never see anything again. His white dress shirt, the same one he had worn at the restaurant that afternoon, was no longer white. Dark stains spread across the chest. The wound itself was somewhere beneath the fabric. Chest or stomach, somewhere vital. Somewhere that had bled extensively before the bleeding stopped. Dead. Recently dead based on the freshness of the copper smell filling the room. The blood had not fully dried. Whatever happened here had happened within the last few hours. Perhaps while Caspian was sitting in his study waiting for Evony's call. Perhaps while he was driving across the city to confront a man who no longer had answers to give. Someone had killed Dominic Voss and left the door open. Left it open for someone to find him. For Caspian to find him. That realization settled into Caspian's mind like ice water. This was not accidental. The unlocked door, the timing, everything about this scene had been arranged. Caspian's eyes moved to the desk surface. The computer was still running. Screen displaying an email client with several unread messages. Documents scattered across the polished wood in patterns that seemed deliberate rather than chaotic. A pen lying at an angle suggesting it had been set down rather than dropped. But none of those details held his attention. What held his attention was the photograph. It sat in the center of the desk, positioned with obvious intention, placed where anyone entering this room would see it immediately, where Caspian would see it immediately. He stepped closer. His pulse pounded in his ears. His hands had begun trembling at some point, and he could not make them stop. The photograph was old, faded at the edges, colors slightly off in the way images from decades past always appeared. Not a digital printout, an actual photograph, the kind developed from film in an era before phones replaced cameras. It showed 3 people standing in front of a house Caspian did not recognize. A woman stood on the left side of the photograph, dark hair pulled back from her face in a practical style, high cheekbones, eyes that looked directly at the camera with an expression difficult to interpret across the distance of years. She appeared young, late 20s perhaps, dressed simply but with attention to detail that suggested either money or the careful imitation of it. Caspian had never seen her before in his life. Next to her stood a man, taller, broader in the shoulders. His face was partially turned away from the camera, as if something outside the frame had caught his attention. But what remained visible of his features sent a chill down Caspian's spine. The jawline, the set of the shoulders, the particular way he held himself. Something about this man looked disturbingly familiar, and between them, holding both their hands, stood a child. A boy, 5 or 6 years old based on his height and proportions. Dark hair falling across his forehead in an unruly wave. Eyes that stared at the camera with the fearless intensity of someone who had not yet learned to hide what he was feeling. A child who looked exactly like Stellan. Exactly like Caspian himself at that age. But the photograph was dated. Handwritten numbers in the corner, faded but legible. 30 years ago, long before Stellan existed. Long before Caspian was old enough to father a child. Long before any of this made rational sense. A photograph from 30 years ago showing a child who looked exactly like his son. How was that possible? Caspian picked up the photograph. His hands were shaking badly now. The image trembled in his grip as he turned it over to examine the reverse side. On the back, in handwriting he did not recognize, were 4 words. "She is not who you think she is." Old handwriting, faded ink that had yellowed with age. Written around the same time the photograph was taken, based on how the letters had deteriorated. But beneath that original message, in different handwriting, fresher and darker, were 3 additional words. "Ask Evony about Rosalind." This second message was recent. The ink was still dark, clear, written within the last few days at most, perhaps within the last few hours. Someone had taken this old photograph with its old warning and added a new instruction, a message intended specifically for Caspian. Rosalind. He had never heard Evony mention anyone by that name. Not once across all their conversations, not in the early days of their relationship when she occasionally shared fragments of her past, not on the bench at the community market when she spoke about her struggles and her choices, not in the phone call tonight when she revealed secrets she had been carrying for years. But someone believed that name would change everything. Someone believed it was important enough to write on a photograph left beside a dead man. Someone wanted Caspian to find this message, to read these words, to ask questions he did not yet know how to formulate. And Dominic had died with this mystery positioned in front of him. The police would arrive eventually. Someone would discover Dominic's body. Building staff conducting routine checks. A housekeeper arriving for scheduled cleaning. A business associate growing concerned when calls went unanswered for too long. An investigation would begin. Detectives would canvass the building. Security recordings would be reviewed. The doorman would remember letting Caspian in without proper verification. His presence here tonight would be documented. Questions would be asked. Alibis would be demanded. Caspian should have stayed. He should have called emergency services immediately, reported what he found, waited for authorities to arrive, given his statement, cooperated fully with whatever investigation followed. That was the responsible course of action. The legal approach, what an innocent person would do without hesitation. Instead, Caspian took the photograph and left. He moved quickly through the penthouse, back through the living room with its expensive furniture and careful arrangements, back through the entryway where the smell of blood still saturated the air, out the door and down the private elevator to the lobby. The doorman looked up as he passed. Caspian nodded once, kept walking. Did not stop until he was in his car with the engine running and the photograph clutched against his chest. He was no longer innocent in the eyes of the law. He had removed evidence from a homicide scene. He had fled. Whatever happened next, he was complicit in ways that could not be explained away. Why did he do it? Caspian asked himself that question as he pulled out of the underground garage and onto the empty streets. The answer was simple and terrible. Whoever killed Dominic had left that photograph deliberately. They had positioned it on the desk where it would be impossible to miss. They had added those words knowing Caspian would be the one to find them. This was a message, constructed specifically for him. She is not who you think she is. Ask Evony about Rosalind. Someone wanted Caspian to see this before anyone else. Someone wanted him to possess information that would not survive the scrutiny of an official investigation. Someone was directing him toward a truth that could not be uncovered through conventional channels. If he had left the photograph behind, it would have been logged as evidence. sealed in a plastic bag, analyzed by forensic specialists who did not understand the players involved, who did not grasp what the name Rosalind might signify. The photograph would have vanished into a system that moved slowly and asked the wrong questions. Caspian could not allow that to happen. Not when answers might be waiting at a bridge in Fremont. Not when the woman who could explain everything was supposed to meet him at dawn. Rosalind, the name occupied his thoughts as he drove through empty streets. He had never encountered it in any context connected to Evony. Not family, not friends, not anyone from the fragmented history she had occasionally shared during their time together. But someone believed that name would change everything. Someone believed it was important enough to commit murder over, because that was what this was. Dominic had been killed, and the photograph with its message had been left for Caspian to discover. Whoever ended Dominic's life knew Caspian would come, knew he would enter that penthouse, knew he would find the body and see what was waiting on the desk. They had planned this, every element of it. And now Caspian was driving toward a meeting with a woman who might not be who he thought she was. A woman with years of her life unaccounted for. A woman whose documented identity began only 12 years ago. A woman who had been with Dominic before she ever met Caspian. A woman who claimed Eleanor and Dominic had been working together all along. Who was Evony really? Who was Rosalind? What connection existed between them? What secret was so dangerous that someone had killed to ensure Caspian would discover it? The photograph lay on the passenger seat beside him. 3 people in front of a house. A child who looked exactly like Stellan, exactly like Caspian at that age, dated 30 years ago. The questions multiplied faster than he could process them. And somewhere in this city, a woman who might be lying about everything was preparing to meet him. Caspian drove toward the Fremont Bridge. The streets were empty at this hour. Approaching 5 in the morning. The city suspended between night and dawn. Streetlights casting pools of orange on wet pavement. The occasional delivery truck moving through intersections without slowing. He had less than an hour until the scheduled meeting. Less than an hour to process everything that had happened. To decide what questions to ask. To prepare himself for revelations he was not certain he wanted to hear. The photograph from Dominic's desk lay on the passenger seat. The child's face stared up at nothing. The handwritten messages on the back seemed to pulse with significance he could not yet decode. His phone buzzed. The sound was loud in the silent car, sharp, demanding immediate attention. Caspian glanced at the screen. Unknown number, local area code. He pulled to the side of the road and retrieved the phone. The message contained no text, only an image. Caspian's breath stopped in his chest. It was Evony, current, recent, taken within the last few hours based on what she was wearing. The same clothing she would have had on when she called him earlier. The same dark jacket. The same hair pulled back from her face in a practical arrangement. She was standing outside an apartment building, her face turned toward the camera, her expression frozen in recognition and terror. Eyes wide, mouth open. The look of someone who has just realized they are not alone, that they are being observed by someone they did not expect. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows at the edge of the frame, was a figure. Tall. The silhouette suggested female, standing at a distance that indicated surveillance rather than direct confrontation, watching, waiting. The figure's face was hidden in darkness, features impossible to distinguish, but the posture communicated everything necessary, confident, patient, the stance of someone who had already won and was simply waiting for others to realize it. Beneath the photograph were 3 words. She has her. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Same unknown number. Come to the warehouse on Harbor Avenue. Another buzz. Alone. Another. Tell no one. One final message. Or the boy learns exactly what his mother really is. Caspian's hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped the phone. The words blurred and sharpened as his eyes struggled to focus through the fear flooding his system. Someone had Evony. Someone was threatening Stellan. The warehouse on Harbor Avenue. He knew the area. Industrial district on the waterfront. Abandoned buildings and shipping containers. The kind of location where things happened that never reached official notice. He had less than an hour until the bridge meeting. But Evony would not be there. She could not be there. Because she was already in the hands of whoever sent these messages. Whoever killed Dominic. Whoever had been watching all of them for longer than Caspian wanted to consider. The timeline collapsed in his mind. Evony's phone call. The revelations about Eleanor and Dominic. The warning to trust nothing and no one. And then this. Capture. Threats. Demands. Someone had been monitoring that conversation. Someone had known the moment Evony decided to tell the truth, and they had moved immediately to silence her. Caspian looked at the old photograph beside him, the one from Dominic's desk, the child who looked like Stellan, who looked like him, dated 30 years in the past. Ask Evony about Rosalind. She is not who you think she is. The words seemed to grow larger in the dim interior of the car, more urgent, more significant. Who was Rosalind? Who was Evony really? What secret was so dangerous that someone murdered Dominic to reveal it, or to prevent its revelation? The questions tangled until Caspian could not separate one from another, could not think clearly, could not do anything except stare at the impossible photograph and the threatening messages and the choice that was crystallizing before him. The bridge where Evony was supposed to meet him, or the warehouse where someone was holding her. Two locations, two paths, two entirely different outcomes, and somewhere in this city, his son was sleeping, unaware, innocent, caught in the center of something he could not comprehend and could not escape. His phone buzzed one more time. Caspian's hand shook as he opened the message. Another photograph. This one showed Stellan. He was sleeping, peaceful, his face relaxed in the complete trust of a child who believes the world is fundamentally safe. His dark hair spread across the pillow in familiar patterns. His small hands curled near his face in the way children's hands often curl during deep sleep. The photograph had been taken tonight. The angle suggested someone standing directly over the bed, looking down at him, close enough to reach out and touch. And in the corner of the frame, visible against the white of the pillowcase, was a woman's hand. A hand wearing a ring. A ring Caspian recognized immediately. He had seen it every day of his childhood, on his mother's finger at breakfast, at dinner, at every family function and business meeting and quiet evening at home. A distinctive piece of jewelry, platinum band, single diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, custom designed, one of a kind, Eleanor's ring, in a photograph of Stellan sleeping, taken tonight. The implications crashed through Caspian's mind with the force of physical impact. His mother, the woman who raised him, who controlled his life, who drove away the woman he loved, who might have staged everything with Dominic from the very beginning. She was in the room with his son. She had found them, and whatever she was planning, it was already in motion. Caspian sat in his car with the engine running. Two locations pulled at him, two impossible choices. The Fremont Bridge, where Evony was supposed to meet him at 6 in the morning, where she had promised to bring evidence, to explain everything, to reveal the truth about Eleanor and Dominic and the conspiracy that had shaped his entire existence. She would not be there. The photographs proved she had been taken, captured before she could reach the meeting point, silenced before she could share what she knew. But what if she had escaped? What if she was making her way there right now? What if going to the warehouse meant missing the one person who could explain everything? Or the warehouse on Harbor Avenue, where someone was holding Evony, where the threatening messages wanted him to go, where a trap was almost certainly waiting. Going to the warehouse meant walking into danger, doing exactly what whoever sent those messages expected him to do, risking his life on the chance that he might save her. But not going meant abandoning her, leaving her in the hands of whoever killed Dominic, letting her suffer the consequences for secrets she had carried alone for years. Both choices were impossible. Both outcomes were uncertain. And somewhere across the city, Eleanor's ring was visible in a photograph of his sleeping son. Who is Rosalind? Caspian did not know. What happened during the 5 years Evony was missing? He did not know that either. Why did the photograph from 30 years ago show a child who looked exactly like Stellan? Like Caspian himself at that age? The question had no answer. Not yet. Was Evony who she claimed to be? A woman who had been used as a test subject by Eleanor? A victim of manipulation who had spent years running for her life? Or was she something else entirely? A professional who targeted wealthy men, as Dominic claimed? Someone whose entire history was a carefully constructed performance? Was Eleanor the monster behind all of this? The architect pulling strings that stretched back decades? The woman who ordered Dominic killed or killed him herself? Who had captured Evony? Who was standing over Stellan's bed at this very moment with intentions Caspian could not begin to imagine? Who killed Dominic? Why did they want Caspian to find the body? Why did they leave the photograph for him to discover? The questions accumulated without resolution, layer upon layer of uncertainty, mystery compounding mystery with no answers in sight. There are no answers yet, only more darkness. Caspian put the car in drive. He made his choice. But you will not learn which location he chose. Not yet. That revelation belongs to the next part of this story. What you need to understand is this. Caspian Aldridge drove into the darkness that night. A man who believed he understood his life, his family, his history, his place in the world. He thought he knew who his mother was, what she was capable of, the boundaries of her control and her cruelty. He thought he knew who Evony was, what they had shared, what she meant to him, what future they might build if he could find a way to reach her. He thought he understood himself, his choices, his failures, the path that had delivered him to this moment, sitting in a car before dawn, with a dead man's photograph and threatening messages and two impossible options. By the time the sun rose, he would understand none of it. Everything he believed would be proven false. Every assumption would collapse. Every certainty would dissolve into questions he was not prepared to confront. And the woman he loved would reveal a secret that changed not just their story, but everything he thought he knew about himself. The truth was coming. And the truth was worse than any lie. And that is where we stop for today. Evony has been taken. Stellan is being watched. Dominic is dead. And Eleanor Aldridge, the woman who raised Caspian, who controlled his entire life, who drove away the woman he loved, might be orchestrating all of it. But we still do not know who Rosalind is. We still do not know what the photograph means. We still do not know whether Evony is the victim she appears to be or something else entirely. The next part drops soon. Subscribe and activate notifications so you do not miss it. Tell me right now what you think. Where did Caspian go? The bridge or the warehouse? And who do you believe is really behind everything? Eleanor? Evony? Someone we have not encountered yet? Comment below with your theory. Share this with someone who loves a compelling mystery. Welcome to Empire of Lies.